Last year, almost every economist predicted that the United States would fall into a recession. But it hasn't happened. At least not yet, anyway. The White House would have us believe that the economy is doing great, but poll after poll after poll shows that the public is unhappy with the state of the economy. What's going on? Is Bidenomics working and people just don't see it yet? Or is there something troubling in the economy that the public sees that the bureaucrats don't? Let's take a look at what's really happening in the economy. Everything feels like it's tied back to inflation these days. It's what people feel every day when they go to the grocery store and their bill inches higher and higher and their income evaporates sooner than expected every month.
We found out this morning inflation is getting hotter.
The latest metric does have inflation bouncing a bit, but it's really too early to know if it's on the rise or if it's just part of the statistical fluctuation that happens with real-world data. What we do know is that inflation has dropped a lot since last year. It is still higher than the target, but the current inflation rate is lower in the United States than in any other developed country. The painful part is that sticky inflation on prices that don't move very much is still high. So households are undoubtedly seeing their fixed costs go up, which feels permanent. The real surprise in the economy right now is employment. For the last 50 years, the belief was that the only way to curb inflation is to slow the economy enough that unemployment rises significantly. This is what many economists predicted would happen this year. And yet, unemployment remains at historical lows. This is an undeniable bright spot for the economy. But the dark cloud to that silver lining is that the tight labor market might make curbing inflation extra difficult. Sure, more people have jobs, but everyone with jobs will feel like they are slowly losing ground to inflation. But is the expansion in the economy reaching everyday Americans? For the last 2 or 3 generations, American economic policy has revolved around growing gross domestic product, or GDP. The theory went that if the economy was growing, everyone would benefit. More and more economists are questioning whether this graph is sufficient anymore. The number is going up, but more and more people are questioning the assumption that a growing economy will benefit everyone. Wealth creation and home ownership amongst younger adults lag behind where their parents were at their age. The gap between the ultra-rich and the middle class is getting wider more quickly than at any other time in the past. So the question is the expanding economy benefiting everyone? So what's the state of American household finances? Well, for one, credit card delinquency rates have been steadily rising since the end of 2021. That, of course, doesn't sound good, but one of the things to remember is that they were at a historically low point right after the pandemic. Credit card companies had pulled back in a significant way. People who would have easily qualified for a credit card before the pandemic were being denied. The credit card companies simply did not know what would happen, and so they chose not to risk capital in the market. Right now, the default rate has just risen above where it has been for the last 10 years. So we need to see if it will flatten out or will continue to rise. From the end of last year, we have had the single biggest and most dramatic drop in the sales price of a house in the United States in more than 50 years. But that doesn't mean that housing is more affordable. There was such a dramatic increase in home prices during the pandemic that we are still well above that point. Also, the monthly payment on a financed home has accelerated because of the dramatic increase in interest rates. So people may hear about how housing prices have dropped, but that doesn't mean more people can afford to buy. And people who are renting feel stuck in quicksand. The cost to rent has accelerated ever since the pandemic. That, frankly, means that people who don't own their own homes are losing ground financially. In one of the more disturbing statistics, we are seeing that the number of children in poverty has jumped 7.2 percentage points from 2021 to 2022.
Newly released data shows the number of children in poverty more than doubled last year.
A statistic like that could lead many to see that the sky is falling. Clearly, the economy is struggling. Only childhood poverty increased because Congress let the expanded child tax credit lapse in 2021. That tax credit did more than any single policy in the last generation to raise households with children out of poverty. Because it went away, those households are dropping back into poverty. People are still not terribly confident in the US economy. It is true that sentiment has been rising for the last year, but 2022 marked the lowest point in the 45-year history of this survey. So I suppose it couldn't have gotten much worse. Here's the thing about optimism. It isn't just subjective. Economic optimism, or pessimism, drives behavior. If people are optimistic, they buy more. They invest in the future and the economy expands. If people are pessimistic, they save more and they are more cautious about taking risks, and the wider economy expands more slowly or could even shrink. 2022 was the first year in the last 8 years that fewer businesses were founded than the year before. That's not a great statistic, but the total number of businesses started is still above where it was 2 years ago. It could have dropped because people are pessimistic, or it could have dropped because the unemployment rate is so low and people are finding work instead of starting their own companies. When we look at the United States economy, we will see good news or bad news depending on how we look at it. That might actually be the point. The economy isn't in a shambles, but it isn't undeniably wonderful either. It may well be that the person who wins the next presidential election will be the person who sees the economy the way most Americans do when they cast their ballots. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more content like this.